felt it would give us the best access to the strongest possible group of senior insurance decision makers.
Insurtech Insights is a must-do conference, I think, for the network that is built here.
Okay, thank you very much for the kind introduction. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak at Insurtech Europe today. The conference couldn't be any timelier, I think, in view of the cross-cutting innovation, which is a transformative force, I think, in this current environment, reshaping industries, reshaping economies, reshaping societies in general. So this is a very opportune conference, which I like to address in my own ways. It's always a challenge for me, first of all, to come over to London, actually, because it takes 15 hours on flight just to get here. And you can imagine all the jet lags which can be involved. Another thing that is a challenge for me is to sort of highlight what IAIS does. Actually, I was at the reception the other night, and people were looking at my card and saying, "Oh, you are Shigeru. Oh, what is IAIS? Is that a company in Asia?" But actually, I tell them that I'm a supervisor. Then there are three reactions. People who don't respond at all, people who will say, "Oh, you are a supervisor," and just shy away. And third, people who would ask me a lot of questions, like, what do you do? What do you do at the IAS? What's your main theme? And so forth. So in any event, I'd like to today mention about the relationship between insurance and innovation. And these are intricate relationships, I would say. For example, in London, you have seen maritime insurance happening in the 1600s, where in the coffee shops in London, not far from here, merchants, insurers, ship owners would get together to form a standardized contract. So, of course, there's a sort of a field or space where everyone would sort of begin the development of insurance. And here, the basic principles for insurance, for example, risk sharing, standardized contracts, and reliable information exchange happened. But here, in our own world, technology and innovation do not stand still, as all of you know very well. For example, the rise of AI, machine learning, LLMs, quantum computing. So those are the developments that we face currently. And here we have to sort of think about the meaning it has in terms of fair, sound, and stable insurance markets. And that is what supervisors and regulators, as Petra mentioned in the last session, think about a lot, because the current environment has all of these emerging issues: sustainable finance, digital, cyber. And those are not only emerging, but actually very cross-cutting in its nature, making it much more challenging, not only for the people who are in the private sector, but also for supervisors and regulators. That is why I think the event like this Insurtech conference, has its own value, because this is a forum where regulators and supervisors, private sectors, tech, insurers can all get together and compare notes on what is happening on the ground. And as Petra mentioned in her last session, what is important for us, regulators and supervisors, is to understand what is happening on the ground. Of course, we ourselves are not doing the business, so that means that we're not always on the same page or same line or same speed as you are. Many of you are here. But it is very important for us to understand, so not to be too much behind of the curve, and also think about what will be the most appropriate regulation and supervision while embracing innovation. And then I think it's very important on the side of the tech companies or the insurance firms to think about what are the safe guardrails that we are thinking about, and the societal role that insurance plays, which is very important, and try to think about what would be a sort of a responsible innovation in that context. So these are very important opportunities, and that is why I came all the way to London for flying 15 hours right now. I mentioned about the challenge of IAIS to sort of, how do I make sure that everyone knows what IAIS does? So actually, we are a voluntary membership organization of insurance supervisors and regulators for more than 200 jurisdictions, and constituting 97% of the world insurance premium. We are responsible for developing global standards for the supervision of the insurance sector, as well as supporting the implementation of these standards. In recent years, we have focused significant efforts on addressing the fault lines exposed by the global financial crisis. So we were working towards making sure that there's a good framework, resilient framework for global insurance standards. So that is what we have been focusing on for the most recent times. We have developed what we call the common framework for supervision for internationally active insurers, what we call insurance groups, what we call IAIGs, including a global insurance capital standard, which we have just finalized last year. I'll touch upon that a little bit later, as well as the holistic framework for the mitigation of systemic risk in the insurance sector. So we look at a sort of a framework to assess what is going on in terms of the risks that are emerging in the insurance sector. So the adoption of the insurance capital standard in Cape Town last December was a monumental achievement, enhancing the effectiveness of the global insurance supervision and strengthening the resilience of the global insurance sector. Now as we have finalized the capital standards, we are much more focusing or shifting our attention from global standard setting to implementation of what we have decided. And this is one of the priorities for us. We have also outlined and set out our strategic plan for 2025 to 2029. 3 core main themes. First, strengthening the supervisory response to climate change. Climate change may be a little bit delicate now to discuss about, but we think that's a very important part of our work moving forward. The second, supporting adaptation to increasing digital innovation and cyber risks, as I mentioned. But last but not least, supporting insurance to serve its critical societal purpose of building resilience. And the latter represents a significant development for us as a standard-setting body, with the IAIS leading the supervisory efforts to address insurance protection gaps. Some of you may have heard. Particularly, we're working on NatCat protection gap. We have seen natural catastrophe, natural disasters happening all over the world. It's not just a problem for a single country. It's not just a problem for a single region. It's not a problem just for advanced economies. It's a problem for the emerging economies. So a global issue needs a global response. And we think that NatCat protection gap is a very important part to sort of think about what the societal role of the insurance sector is in the future, and also to think about financial inclusion and what role can the insurance sector play in that regard. So I mentioned about responsible digital innovation. And this is something that we really need to think about with respect to the rise of generative AI. Of course, Gen AI has its value. It can create, deliver, and capture value for the insurance firms. It can enhance policyholder services. It can enhance your risk management on the insurance firms. And it can also enhance your services, diversifying your services in general. So clearly, there's benefits associated with the development of Gen AI. And let me be clear that IAIS as an organization is very mindful of the benefits associated with the digital innovation moving forward. But also, there's no benefits without risks. And here we have to be mindful to make sure that we think through about the benefits of the innovation, as well as being mindful of the risks that it can create, and to try to come up with an appropriate regulation and supervision for insurance firms. And this is how to best manage potential conduct risks, prudential risks, and for the insurance companies, more importantly, perhaps inclusion risks as well. So we are working very much on those fronts. For example, there are operational resilience risks for insurance, take cyber, IT outsourcing, BCPs, and concentration risks. Those are some of the things that it's our habit. It's sort of, it comes to our mind and we start thinking about what the implications they might have in the future for us. From part of financial inclusion, how do you think about discriminatory practices that might emerge, reinforce biases? Even if you think that you're not biased and you don't think of it that way, the result could be de facto biased. So here's a challenge for firms to really think about what does it actually mean, not only for us, but for yourselves as well. Data privacy issues, very much important. Not something that we have thought about in a sector by sector basis, but data privacy is a cross-cutting issue around all sectors, but including the insurance sector. And of course, the opaqueness and the complex nature of some AI models could pose challenges on the question of explainability, accountability, where it becomes difficult to trace decisions or the reasons why this outcome came out, in a sense. So here, it will be very important to be mindful of this aspect, try to have a human touch, perhaps, to make sure that the insurance sector remains fair and trustworthy with the outcome, on the outcome basis. So our goal for IAIS is, I want to emphasize this point, is about proportionate management of these potential risks, supervisory measures that can help assess and mitigate the potential negative outcomes of digital innovation, while at the same time not creating a barrier for responsible innovation. In fact, well-designed regulation, and I want to be humble a bit about talking about this, but well-balanced, well-designed regulation should be a stimulant rather than a brake on innovation that truly helps to achieve better consumer outcomes and meaningful inclusion. And IAIS is a standard-setting body, but we also cooperate with other international organizations. For example, the Financial Stability Board. We always interact with the FSB to sort of highlight an insurance perspective, particularly recently on the work of innovation and the work particularly on AI. We're collaborating with the FSBs on the Financial Innovation Network, for example. We collaborate on AI, crypto, and so forth. And it is very important to sort of try to get a comprehensive view, while providing an insurance perspective. Try to see what's going on in the banking world. Try to see what's going on in the broker-dealers world. Trying to see what kind of financial stability risks have been discussed in the FSB. So those aspects are very important to make sure that we can sort of reflect and make inputs for a broader set of financial regulators, and also try to bring in what is being discussed in other sectors, banking, securities, as I mentioned, and try to reflect on them and try to take reference, if needed, what is happening on the other ground. Japan FSA, I'll talk about this a little later. FSA is an integrated regulator. For example, I'm the vice minister at FSA. We cover banking, securities, insurance, crypto. We cover FATF as well. We're also a policy maker. So we are in that term, have a sort of a holistic view about what is happening on some of the cross-cutting issues I mentioned, on, for example, on digital innovation or sustainable finance and climate, and cyber. So I'll try to share with you, not an advertisement for the later panel with Petra, but I'll try to share my thoughts on that as well. Now, what do? First of all, for us, we do a sort of what we call a global monitoring exercise, where we have collect data for 59 of the largest insurance firms. So we do a sort of an individual sector analysis, as well as we look at the aggregate and see what the sector-wide implications are in this rapidly changing economic and environment, as well as geopolitical sort of environment as well. So we look very carefully, and then we'll think about what we do in terms of our macro-prudential framework. And for this, we think, particularly in the context of cyber, incorporating cyber scenarios in stress tests, collecting data on our common sort of vulnerabilities, and supporting international initiatives to enhance the resilience of the financial sector. So those are some of the points that would be important for us. Operational resilience, look at AI actual use cases, and third-party risks, and maybe Petra has mentioned a bit about that. And she is actually the vice chair. She's not only the chair of AOPAS, but she's the vice chair for IAIS. And she also leads our work on the fintech. She's a fintech, what we call the champion. So she also chairs the IAIS Fintech Forum as well. And what is important for us is engagement. And I think this is not only true in terms of digital innovation, but engagement, a multi-stakeholder approach. Think about what everyone can do to sort of make sure that we are moving in the right direction to provide benefits, enhance societal resilience, and to have a better future in terms of economic growth. We have just issued our paper on AI, which has just been it's pretty hot right now. But this is a very important book, and what we have issued is what we call the application paper, which looks at how supervisors can apply these against these developments, against what we call the insurance core principles. So it is not something that it's not something that is a requirement for all supervisors to think about. It provides a basis on how they should apply the insurance core principles. So it's not a hard law. It's about providing materials that enables the supervisors to apply supervision, looking at the insurance core principles. 4 points in the AI paper. Number one, governance and accountability. This includes the need to integrate AI into risk management systems, provide human oversight at the same time on this, and consider around the use of third parties. Second, robustness, safety, and security. This considers issues related to the robustness, safety, and security of the AI systems themselves. So you have to take a look and see what you are working with is actually something that is safe and sound from your perspective. Number three, transparency and explainability. I mentioned a bit about it. This is actually very challenging because it's very difficult and challenging to understand how they operate, how the AI operates, and how did they come to this result. Easy to say, but very challenging to be done. Fourth, but final, is fairness, ethics, and redress. This is a need to be fair by design, monitor outcomes I mentioned, and adequate redress mechanisms must be there. It also highlights the need for supervisors and insurers to consider the societal impact of granular risk pricing on the principle of risk pooling. So we are looking to develop such kind of mutual understanding among supervisors. Of course, tech is not something that we always, sort of look at the industry and think about how to supervise or regulate. It's something that we also should take in. Regulators and supervisors are not always in the forefront of innovation. But it is important for us to think about how we can actually embrace and leverage on the digital innovation that is happening. And that is very important to sort of upgrade our capability to analyze, capability to engage with insurance firms, capability to better assess what is going on, and it has its benefits. And I think that benefit can also flow through, spill over to the insurance industry, because if there's a regulator who is willing to embrace this, take it in, we will have probably more efficient and effective supervision and regulation, which would be better for the insurance sector as a whole. So we are looking very carefully on that aspect. A lot of discussions among supervisors and regulators to share information what they do on what we call the SupTech. And this is an emerging and increasing trend that I think would be important for us in the future. In conclusion, what I hope to have left with you this morning is a message that as insurers adopt new technologies, we will continue to expect that they include a consumer perspective at the heart of their operations. I mentioned about societal resilience. I mentioned about responsible AI, responsible innovation. I hope that that is something that the industries can really reflect on. At the same time, we are fully cognizant of the concern that the regulatory requirements on AI could hamper innovation in the sector, and that is not our intent, as I have emphasized. That is why we have not developed new standards, but rather focused on how existing governance and risk frameworks could be adopted. Any response will need to balance the need for proper guardrails while still embracing innovation, which are very much committed to. Last but not least, I'd like to mention and emphasize the importance of engagement. Sometimes, as Petra mentioned in her answers in the end, sometimes you may think that regulators are someone, as I mentioned in my episode about the reception, someone who is difficult to discuss, and you might want to shy away. But I think it's, for us, we want to make sure, we have a very important role to play, but that depends on the resilience, on the robustness, and the vibrance of the private sector. So I want to emphasize, in the end, the importance of engagement, and thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Shigeru. A couple of questions for you to finish off. So I'll come a little bit closer this time.
Sure.
So I guess in summary,
yes.
We live in a time of geopolitical uncertainty,
yes.
climate change, aging populations, technological innovation and uncertainty there, as you say. So in summary, how systemically stable is the global insurance sector, and what are the greatest risks to that stability? In other words, what is the likelihood that a shock might come along and destabilize the sector in the coming?
Thank you, Erickson. That's a very nice question, very important question. If you look into history, I think what happened after the global financial crisis was very important. I wouldn't say we liked that, but it posed us challenges in terms of supervisory and regulatory responses. And we have built up sort of a framework to ensure that the sector remains safe and sound in that respect. And I think that has sort of proved that we have been able to do that against the backdrop of what we have had with the pandemic and also with higher interest rates. And I think that the insurance sector continues to be profitable, continues to be resilient in terms of its capital positions, and I think that will continue on as we move into an uncertain, my hope maybe, uncertainty about economic and geopolitical developments that we are currently facing. So I'm positive currently about the status of the insurance sector.
You mentioned interest rates. No threat there from interest rates as they potentially begin to drop over the coming years?
Well, I think for us, interest rates, I think for insurance firms, are something that they always think about in terms, one of the traditional points when they think about risk management. And I think the introduction of the ICS would be helpful in that regard to sort of sharpen the focus on the risk management front. What I'm not certain is about the developments on the geopolitics and how that would impact not only perhaps but just by interest rates, but in other factors as well. And I think that we have to be very mindful in this era of unpredictability in that regard.
Certainly is. I guess the certainly more predictable question, I guess, is around AI innovation in general, kind of the direction of AI innovation. What is the risk, I guess, of over-regulating there, of impeding AI innovation and AI impacts in insurance?
I think that's a very important point, and some of the points that Petra mentioned in her last session. I think for the regulators, it's a very fine balance between not being too behind the curve, but not being too ahead of the curve. Because if you are too ahead, that would stifle innovation. And is that what we want from an overall sort of economic perspective? That is not what we want. But so we don't want to be too ahead, but we don't want to be too behind. But in order to do that, we need to know what's happening on the ground, what kind of innovation is actually happening, and what kind of risks and vulnerabilities it can produce. At the same time as while being mindful of the benefit. So that's where things become very sort of delicate in nature. For example, Japan, we sort of look at it not by hard law, but perhaps a little bit more softer, flexible sort of approach. And the reason we do that is we are very much mindful of that sort of a trade-off that can happen. Sometimes we are asking politicians, why don't you do more? And we will always respond, if we do more right now, then the innovation might actually stop or go other way. So that's also sort of the issues that I think regulators are very much mindful in terms of innovation.
Well, I suppose here is a fairly good place to remain on point to understand where we are in terms of innovation, in terms of risk, and therefore where we should be kind of on the regulatory spectrum. Anything to add there?
Well, I think it's a developing sort of episode right now. But I want to emphasize, for example, you look at AIs or innovations. I think it's very important actually to involve the developers of the technology, not just those who use the technology. Because responsible innovation does not come from people who are using it or adapting it in some way. So important actually to involve the developers of the AI sort of innovation.
Sounds good. Well, I hope you meet a lot of those developers here today. I'm sure you did yesterday. Thank you so much for your time, Shigeru Ariizumi-san, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much, everyone.